Hello everyone, this is your host with History Topic Videos, and today we are going to meet a man who was called the conscience of a nation. As a boy, Charles Sumner got into big trouble for an unkind remark he made about a girl's bonnet. Let me tell you about it, and let me begin by telling you about the incident that inspired this painting. The territory of Kansas was preparing to become a state, and the question was, would it be a slave state or a free state? Pro-slavery and anti-slavery advocates descended on the Capitol to lobby the Congress. They said it would be a good opportunity to meet some influential people. Sumner thought it was funny. He told them he'd be right there. Then he turned around and wrote down their names and handed them to the sergeant-at-arms and told him to arrest them for treason. That didn't go over very well either. Brooks decided to run for re-election in Massachusetts, of all places. Even though he had beaten a senator from Massachusetts nearly to death, while he was campaigning, people held anti-Brooks riots. They pulled down his posters. They shouted curses at him. But still, he won the election. And then came a delegation from the pro-slavery forces. They were led by a man named Samuel Walker, a former sheriff who had gained notoriety for capturing runaway slaves. It took him 3 months to regain consciousness. His eyesight was saved, but he was permanently deaf in one ear. When he returned to work, Brooks ran up to him and shook his hand and said, "Mr. Sumner, I want you to know that I am not your enemy personally." And Sumner reached back, and he shook Brooks's hand and he said, "Mr. Brooks, I want you to know that I do not feel a personal animosity towards you." And that was that. No apologies, no retraction. They called him a disgrace to the Senate and threatened to whip him. Was Charles Sumner the conscience of a nation? Well, if you ask me, the answer is yes. He was fearless in the face of injustice. He was eloquent in his denunciation of it. And despite the fact that he was beaten nearly to death, he refused to back down. But what about you? What do you think? Was Sumner the conscience of a nation? Let us know in the comments below. The other senators watched for a few seconds, but nobody intervened until Brooks finished beating Sumner and dropped his cane. We're shouting out all of our patrons in alphabetical order, so we'll start with Adam B. Thank you for being a patron. And we'll end with Zach. Thank you for being a patron. Thanks to all of you for watching, and thanks to all of you for supporting us. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any of our new videos. And we'll see you soon. But when the House of Representatives voted on the matter, they decided not to expel Brooks from the House, just to censure him. The Senate didn't even censure Brooks. They did nothing. So now the real question was, would Charles Sumner live or die? That was the big story across the country. Newspapers reported on his condition every day. People sent flowers and telegrams to his home, offering support. Women gathered together to pray for his recovery. And while all this was going on, Brooks basked in the adulation of the pro-slavery crowd. People sent him congratulatory telegrams. They raised money to bail him out of jail. He was hailed as a hero. Then they jumped in and pulled Brooks off of Sumner. By that time, Sumner had lost consciousness. He was bleeding profusely from his ear, and his head was badly bruised. His colleagues carried him out of the chamber and helped him down the Capitol steps. A doctor examined him and said he might lose his eyesight. The prognosis was very poor. Sumner looked back at them and said, "You may think I have said too much. You may think my language has been too strong, but I say if anybody here is not a traitor, let them rise and say so." Nobody did. Then Sumner added, "I know what traitors you are. You are traitors to the Constitution." At that, the can of worms was opened and the floodgates of hell broke loose. His group presented a petition to Congress asking them to allow slavery in Kansas. "That bonnet makes you look like a witch," he said. And when his mother heard about it, she said, "Charles, someday you're going to get killed because you can't keep your mouth shut." But Charles didn't listen. He grew up and he became famous for keeping his mouth open and not shutting it. He was a senator from Massachusetts for 28 years, but when he returned to Washington, D.C., he took to the floor and denounced the pro-slavery delegation. He said, quote, "I see here a conspiracy to overthrow the Constitution. There are men here engaged in a conspiracy against the Union. If the South can bring the government of this country to be an instrument to enforce slavery, then it will be a change of which no man living can foresee the consequences." He went on to denounce slavery as a moral evil and as an affront to American ideals. He said the United States was founded on the proposition that all men are created equal. But now the South wanted to amend that ideal with a rider that said, "Unless you are black," well, that went over really well. He opposed slavery, even after it was abolished. He fought for civil rights for African Americans. He demanded equal access to public transportation. He was one of the first people to call for women's suffrage. And he denounced the persecution of suspected convicts. In other words, he spoke out against all kinds of injustice. That's what made him famous. But it also made him enemies. Powerful enemies. So much so that one time they beat him nearly to death. It happened in 1856 at the height of the debate over slavery. Now, Charles Sumner wasn't there that day. He was on vacation in Europe. The next day, two men approached Sumner in his office and asked if he would like to buy a ticket to a pro-slavery rally that evening. The following Monday, a group of pro-slavery congressmen confronted Sumner on the floor. One of the congressmen, a guy named Brooks, grabbed his cane and beat Sumner over the head with it. Now, most people expected Brooks to be arrested, tried, and convicted for his actions. Well, what happened next was even crazier. Meanwhile, Sumner was recovering from his injuries. So now, after all that, let's answer the question I posed at the beginning. And speaking of comments, let's move on to our comments shoutout. We're doing something new this year.